Welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are once again live in Los Angeles at Greenbuild, and today I am joined by Ben Stapleton, the Executive Director of USGBC California. Today we're going to be talking a bit about the wildfire response in Southern California, but we'll be using this as a launching point to talk about rebuilding after the fires, the impacts of climate change more broadly, and what people could do, both builders and owners or individuals, to prepare and improve for, future challenges like this. And so, Ben, I got to say, it's a good day today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's day 4 for me of Greenbuild, so it's a marathon, not a race. So you can probably hear it in my voice a little bit. And it's only because I've been having so many good conversations with good people to try to make the world a slightly better place. So, it's not terrible. I look forward to this event every year. And this is a year where we need the inspiration, right? We need to come together. So to be here, and I really appreciate being on this podcast. Been looking forward to it for a long time.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciated our original conversation, and I've been, getting amped for our discussion today. And so to kind of set the stage, I was hoping you could tell me more about the mission of USGBC California and how you spend your time as executive director.
Well, it's not as glamorous as it might seem. We are, the U.S. Green Building Council of California. We're an independent nonprofit, so I like to say for California, by California. We work in partnership with the National U.S. Green Building Council that runs the LEED credential and certification that most folks know. But our mission is a little bit different, and our work is different. We're really focused on making California a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable place for all. So pretty simple. And we do that through leading, advocating, connecting, convening, and all those are action words because we believe that we need to be focused on action right now in the fight against climate change. And I really look at us as a platform to help lift up all these people who are doing amazing work, connect them with each other, and get those projects happening faster, get that education happening faster so that we can transform the market. I kind of have this beautiful vision in my mind of like this neural network across the state and us strengthening all those neurons and people connecting and us proving out a model for positivity. People simply working together to make things that make the world a better place. And I think people are really looking for that right now. And in terms of the day in the life for me, like I said, it's not quite as glamorous as it might seem. If you listen to my wife, apparently all I do is do remarks and never drink more than 2 beers. That's always the rule. But, I'd say, being the life of executive director, especially for a state as big as California, it can be a lonely life at times. I think everything always rolls up to you at some point, any issue, any problem you have to deal with. But ultimately, my responsibility is to make sure that the organization's on point for where we're headed. I spend a lot of my time really thinking through programmatic design, what's the work we're going to do, and crafting that narrative when we're going after funding for grants or for contracts. And that's honestly one of my favorite things to do is really work with the team and brainstorm, and maybe it's with us internally or with partners. Like, what are we going to do that's going to be worthwhile and worth funding? It's going to impact people. And coming up with models for how that works. And I tell my team all the time, hey, we can do anything. All we need is money and people. The hard part is actually getting the money and the people. But yeah, it's a lot of connecting with folks like this, really setting a vision for the mission. And vision is something I think that we need more of these days as well. So I can unpack that more, but I don't want to go too long.
No, but I appreciate the point about action, especially. And I was speaking with Sarah Neff from Microsoft yesterday, and one of her comments was like, take action now, like start now, because all of the choices we make of reducing carbon and increasing our green initiatives have immediate impact. And that has long-term implications as well. And so folks out there who are, trying to figure out what choices they should make, hopefully they heed your advice here as far as take action now and be very intentional, because it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the discussion loop about what we need to do or the challenges. And there's a lot of noise in the market right now. And so I appreciate your optimism as well. And so I kind of want to lean into what I mentioned a moment ago, tied to the wildfires here in California. For those who might not be listening, and we have half of our audience is outside of the United States, could you give a little bit of context as to what happened at the beginning of this year, where are the rebuilding efforts now, and just kind of the state of the world in that regard?
Whew, no small questions.
Big
there.
questions.
Yeah. Look, it's funny when you're living through something, you always kind of feel like, well, everyone must know, right? Yeah. Everything that's going on. It's hard to understate the scale of devastation from these fires. And look, there's communities all over the world, all over our state, right, that have experienced wildfire at an increasing rate due to drought, due to increased heat. And, the scale here is pretty overwhelming. We lost about 19,000 structures. About 16,000 of those were single family homes. in 2 communities. This is one of those interesting things that every year, I've grown up in LA, we get Santa Ana winds, which basically for us is when we get winds that come out of the desert, they blow down over the mountains and down. And one of the fascinating things, I'm a little bit of a nerd, if you haven't picked that up yet, but
Me too. You're a good company.
they gain essentially a degree or two every 1,000 feet they come down the mountain. So you have winds sometimes. In this case, in that night, in January 7th, when we had these winds, and keep in mind, it's January 7th, it's January, almost 100-mile-per-hour winds, and they could have been 90, 95 degrees. When you do that, people talk about what caused the fire. My argument is like, well, it could be really anything that causes a fire when you're dealing with that situation. And people talk a lot about the wildland-urban interface, or the WUI. And yes, we had fire that started and got blown out of our wildland into these homes, but it very quickly became an urban fire. And that's something we don't talk about enough as part of this as well. And so we lost 16,000 single-family homes, as I said. And the fire stopped only about 1.5 miles from my house. My family and I were evacuated for 5 or 6 days. I had 3 team members on my team who lost their homes. Again, it's hard to understate the impact. Everyone in LA felt it. And beyond LA, I think people know so many people here. It's been interesting to live through that. For us, we had been doing work probably for about 5 or 6 years now since the Thomas and Woolsey fire around wildfire recovery and rebuilding. We started hosting workshops in 2018, 2019. There was so much we were unprepared for trauma. We're coming in, hey, we want to help folks rebuild green. And the trauma is real. One thing I think we need to be thinking about more, especially around climate, there's this great graph I use when I'm speaking about this topic. When you have a disaster, there's this moment where people come together and it's kind of the hero moment. We're helping each other and there's this high that comes from that and we're going to build better and it's going to be great. And then the action fades, right? People move on. And we're in this dip right now of this like long, slow, disappointing trough of the reality. And the reality is it's going to take 5 or 10 years to rebuild from this. And that's in a place that has the resources, supply chain. I sit on the Blue Ribbon Commission for LA County that Supervisor Horvath put together. So myself and about 15 other sustainability leaders, we put together a big report, which we released just a few months ago around action items, again, action of what needed to be done. We identified the who and the what needed to be done out of this recovery. And one of the things that blew me away is that even at that point, the fire happened in January. I think we released our report in July or August. We were already much further ahead of recovery than the folks who lived through the Lahaina fire in Maui. And that's simply because of access to resources and supply chain issues. And that kind of blew me away, right? Because you feel like, well, wait a minute, that happened so long ago now. And it's one thing thinking about how kind of fortunate we are that they have access to that, seeing this disaster play out. And I can get into some of the work we're doing, but we're in these communities really on a weekly basis right now. One thing I want to just going back to that climate, we're experiencing this trauma. We're in this sort of down cycle, right? And we're learning like what this is going to be like. One of the things that started to resonate with me as I've been traveling around the state, meeting with different communities who've gone through fires, gone through landslides, right? Gone through these things. When it comes to climate, we're actually experiencing these different sort of cycles of going through a climate disaster, and they're being overlaid on each other, right? And you go through that, and then you get triggered a year after the event. You get triggered 2 years that maybe something happens, and so we're all starting to live through that. And we need to start thinking more about the human element of what we're dealing with here, which also matches up with the rebuilding process. But I don't think we give that enough credit.
It's such a heavy conversation to talk about. And like, I live in Southern Oregon, and the Alameda fire heavily impacted the area that I live in 2020. And so the cities of Talent and Phoenix largely burned to the ground as well. And it's a much smaller community than LA is. But the challenge and your point about resources and the ability to navigate what comes next, it really resonates for the Southern Oregon community, because a lot of folks are underinsured. A lot of folks don't have or not insured at all. And so it's 2025 now, 5 years later, and all of the people that were displaced and all of the houses that were lost and the community, parts of the community that were lost, have not fully been rebuilt yet. And there are still people living in RVs and small trailers, or have moved away entirely because the community didn't have the resources available to quickly pivot and start building back again. And so it's a constant stressor for folks who live in communities of wildfire risk or any other climate change risk. And in the summertime now, I mean, we always talk about fire season, which is something that didn't really come up when I first moved to the West Coast in 2010. And granted, I was a lot younger and likely a little less aware than I am today. But during fire season in Southern Oregon, I think about this all the time. And I have a lot of notification systems on my phone and other ways. And so I'm always a little bit stressed every single time I get one of those push notifications. And while my personal home is not at an immediate high risk, I don't live in the woods specifically, it doesn't go away because, as you pointed out earlier, a rural woodland fire can pivot into something that is in town and burning homes and really impacting the communities. And it's just a tough moment. I don't even know how to summarize and wrap it up because it stresses me out so personally.
It's a visceral reaction, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is my point, I think, about when you mention wildfire to people, even to you, right? It's like you have an emotional response.
Yes.
That is part of the rebuilding process as well. That does need to be honored and respected as part of that. But yeah, it's real.
Let's step back from just wildfires specifically for a moment. I'd like it if we could look more broadly and could get your perspective on the potential impacts of climate change and what that's going to bring into our communities. Your point a moment ago about like the secondary effects. I think a good example is when an area burns heavily and then you get rains a couple years later, now you've got mudslides that happen regardless of if it's a mountainous area that expects that regularly. And so there's secondary impacts of that. But climate change is touching so many aspects of our communities. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts about that beyond just the wildfire part.
And look, it can be very overwhelming. One of the things I say about California all the time is that California is sort of a microcosm of the world. We have all these different climate zones. We have urban areas and suburban areas. And we also have like the largest port infrastructure in the U.S. We have the largest manufacturing base in the U.S., the largest agricultural base in the U.S. We have Silicon Valley. We have Hollywood. We have all these things. And so one of the things I sort of find fascinating is that we have all these resources and we experience, yes, wildfire. We experience water scarcity. We experience extreme heat. We're seeing coastal erosion, right? We're seeing biodiversity loss. All these things start to add up. But one of the things I think about here is that we actually have the opportunity to try to solve some of these challenges and export solutions out because we have the largest population outside of their home country, over 65 different ethnicities in California. And that gives us this incredible global network for us to reach out to. So, these things, like I was saying, they kind of layer on each other, right? And so you look at wildfire as we see increased times of extreme drought and then extreme weather events, right? And we got those rain cycles that'll pick up and be increasing. It does start to cause these impacts in an increasing way. And one of the things I love about the green building movement is that we have solutions that are tangible to help solve a lot of these challenges, right? And wildfire to me is a great example. And like, this is actually part of why we dove so much into this work a few years ago. When I started learning about, through that work after the Thomas and Woolsey fire, the things that you could do to reduce wildfire risk, vents, over different parts that are exposed in your home, enclosing your eaves, using materials that are going to be more fire resistant, not having adjoining structures in your home. And you start to sit back, you're like, well, most of these things are actually not very expensive or some of them maybe no cost at all, especially if you're doing it at the beginning, but there's no education or awareness around it. And to me, that was a call that we needed to kind of own that as an issue. I think between resilience and sustainability, there's a huge amount of overlap. Sustainability to me is just having a more sustainable society and balance with the environment around us. And that is resilience, right? We started kind of owning those elements and we started doing home hardening tours and we developed certifications for landscapers and contractors because I found there was no one owning the space. The education could do so much. And coming back to rebuilding for a second, one of the things that's also blown me away is we have in California what's called Chapter 7A, the fire code. It's the most strict part of the fire code that when you're in a high fire severity zone, you should use that code. Well, the data shows that to build to that code is only $5,000 to $25,000 more expensive for a new build. So we're talking on a new home, it's only that much more expensive to build to meet this highest strict part of code, even if you're going to hit the insurance standards that are like the most strict. It may be as much as only 25 or 30 grand more. So, but we're not doing it because people don't know. And so that's what we're trying to tackle is build that awareness. And I think there does need to be a cultural shift for us as communities. I mean, you mentioned you're from Southern Oregon. We need to start taking more ownership as communities on how do we care for each other? How to respond to a disaster? What does that look like? Because our first responders, we'd like to think that they're always going to be the fire department and the police, but honestly, it's probably your neighbors, right? Yeah. And how are we lifting each other up in those events of disaster and putting the tools and infrastructure there to support that?
And to your point, you don't know what you don't know. And so I've got friends who own property out in the woods in Southern Oregon, and the amount of fire abatement that they've done very deliberately for their property, both in just the vegetation that surrounds their home, some of the choices to your point about the materials that they're making, vents that don't pull in embers, roofing materials that don't start on fire easily. And I watched them do this, and it takes a lot of effort for them to do themselves, but their certainty that their property is going to be okay if something happens is meaningful. It's hard to weather a loss like that, especially in a very high fire risk. Like I lived in the Bay Area for a long time as well, and also in a very high fire danger area part of the Bay. And so this has been something I've been thinking about for the last, 5 to 6 years in a much heavier way than I had historically. It is a stressful thing to just have in the back of your mind 4 to 6 months out of the year. I'm hopeful that we can continue to educate folks to help them feel more prepared and have access to information to make choices about how to manage what they do if there is an emergency or a risk. Because I also run into a lot of folks that don't have access to the information. Like Watch Duty is a great app that I use on my phone that is very good about notifying folks about urgency of regional fires and evacuation issues. And I'm a nerd, so I've got fire radios and a bunch of other apps where I go big in the data because it makes me feel better to have a little bit more knowledge to influence the choices I make. But I had to spend a lot of time figuring out where those resources were. And for somebody who's not tech savvy or might not have great internet access or many other myriads of things that could impact their access, it's a tall order to go from zero to I feel fully informed about what my risk is and how I can mitigate it, whether there's a fire or we're just preventing one. So there's a lot wrapped up in that. And I'm grateful that your team is thinking about it that way. I want to click in a little bit more about the rebuilding. And you had mentioned that you can go into more detail about what your team is doing. So can you tell me a bit more about what that work looks like for you out on the ground?
For us, like I said, several of our team members lost their homes, and we've been doing this work for years. And so we had built a great network of expertise across the state, in fact, across the West Coast, of people who've been dealing with fire who helped us with our wildfire defense classes. We've actually certified about 1,800 people on home hardening and landscape hardening.
Oh, wow.
In the last 2 years. Also, like, we had so many people who've lived through fire in different parts of California. When these disasters hit, our team quickly pivoted to say, okay, how do we use this content? How do we use this network of expertise to be part of the solution? And I have to really say, this was a beautiful moment because we actually just unified last April 7 different green building communities across California into a new statewide entity.
Nice.
It was not a small thing, but it was a recognition by everyone that things needed to change. We needed to evolve. We need to do things faster. We have 10 leadership groups across the state now that are working regionally to make impact. But
we have to work together.
We have to. And people called me from Sonoma. People called me from other places and they said, hey, Ben, we tried to rebuild and this is where things didn't work. Mm-hmm. And this is where we went wrong. And we want to impart this to you as you go into this process. And that meant a lot. I talked to a gentleman who managed a lot of the recovery from the Marshall Fire out in Colorado. So initially I told my team, what if we could get 20% of these homes to rebuild more sustainably, more resiliently, and 20% of 16,000 homes. I'm not a mathematician, right? But that's a lot of homes.
Yeah.
And I talked to him and he said that by educating the public, by educating the contractors, creating some availability of incentives, they were able to get 80% of those homes to rebuild all electric and more resilient and sustainable.
That's incredible.
And that blew me away. And so to me, that was that's our mission. Let's focus on how do we educate the contractors, educate the builders, and educate the public to make those resources available. So what we did is we launched a rebuilding guide in April that we developed with our partners at Arup. I highly encourage people to check it out. It's, for us, I think it was a landmark moment. We wanted to create something that was comprehensive, yet really, really accessible. Because, in the technical community, we're so guilty of creating these 40-page white papers that nobody wants to read. And people need things that are digestible, actionable. And that's on us, to be honest with you, to deliver that. And so in this guide, we've got really clear pathways of co-benefits, cost. If you choose this material, this is how it benefits your home. If you choose this material, it's going to have lower embodied carbon, but it may cost more or it may cost less. And what that looks like, we have a whole section on native plants. We have a section on communities working together. We've had a ton of thousands upon thousands of downloads of this and people looking at it. We bring it into community workshops. So we're doing community workshops once a month in community. If we're not running it ourselves, we're participating in others. We have training we're offering now for contractors. We're doing a rebuild training we created and we launched in August. We're offering that at no cost once a month because of support from partners like the Clean Power Alliance, the LA Department of Water and Power, some of our local utilities and others. And so we're offering those classes. We're also looking at digital twins. And this is something that we identified early on could be really helpful. People are making decisions in a vacuum.
Oh, for sure.
And if you know where your neighbor's putting their home, if you know how tall they're building it, if you understand the wind corridors, well, that might completely impact where you place your home and what your setback looks like, where you put your accessory structure, how you do your landscape. But nobody's having those conversations as neighbors or on a community basis. And so we're trying to work with a group out of LA Trade Tech. They have an engine called Aura. We've had a couple of webinars where we've had architects come in and populate stuff where people can upload their CAD files and others. It actually uses an Unreal 3D gaming engine. So people can see, oh, that's where my neighbor's putting, oh, well, wait a minute, I'm going to do this, right? And that's how you create community resilience and collaboration. So the last thing I want to mention is around cost and accessibility. So we also white labeled a platform by a company called Building Ease, and we created a rebuild marketplace. So what this tool does is it creates purchases of similar items, similar timing and geography, automatically bundles them together. So the manufacturers can bid on them and reduce cost.
Nice.
They can also set standards. If people are going to purchase 100 grates, let's say, they can offer a 25% discount. They can actually see the purchase. You can see it as a neighbor. Oh, wait a minute. There's a bunch of people here purchasing heat pumps. If I get on that, I can drop my cost by 15%. We created that tool. So we're trying to get these things out there to see how can we do this a little bit differently? What does that look like? But it's an effort and it's got to be sustained. I can't underscore that enough. After we did these workshops in 2018, 2019, we get calls 4 or 5 years later from people who are trying to figure things out, still working to rebuild. Again, sort of this democratizing of education, but also providing those certificates for contractors and others so that they can have something they can add to their resume and it could be an opportunity for them to grow as a worker and employee. That goes a long way.
So first off, we'll make sure to include some links to the resources you're talking about in the show notes so folks can go out and find those materials and check them out. And I'm very glad to hear that they're accessible because, to your point, you don't know what you don't know. And in giving folks a digestible resource to start rebuilding and figuring out where to go is incredibly impactful and important. But it's really neat what you're doing for digital twins as well. That's a topic that comes up for me most commonly in the commercial world. And I don't see it in residential, especially deployed at the scale that you're speaking of to not just, replicate somebody's individual home for their own choices, but the entire community. And what a tremendous opportunity to create this, living, breathing replication of what gets built. And that has, long-reaching impacts, especially if they continue to update it as the community unfolds and changes in the coming years. So a really cool kind of blend of just very intentional education, but technology to empower folks. So it sounds like you're doing some pretty incredible work. And I know we've touched on these a little bit through our conversation so far, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to unpack a little bit more if you have any thoughts. What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing right now for either homeowners or contractors in the communities as they try to rebuild? I know we've kind of glanced over it, but if you have any other thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
I have so many thoughts.
That's why you're here, Ben.
I've spent about a third of my time since the beginning of the year on this recovery and rebuilding effort. And people spend all their time, right? A few things that kind of come to mind for me, one is the supply chain and logistics component of this. Again, the LA region built about 12,000 homes in the last decade. Yes, we're not good at building housing. I think that's people are well aware of that. But we're talking about rebuilding 16,000, more than housing we built in the last decade.
Yeah,
in the next couple of years.
It's a staggering number.
I was on a panel a few weeks ago with some developers who are home builders, and each one of them was building about 50 homes. One was focused on the Palisades, more high-end homes. One was focused on Altadena. And I've never heard anybody say this as a developer. They were like, we need 20 to 50 more of us. There's no possible way we can build enough. And that was an amazing thing to hear from a developer who's trying to get all the business they can to build homes.
Yeah.
And they're sending people to us to try to get guidance because they're like, we have more volume than we can deal with. So that's I think a really interesting thing to note as part of this. The cost thing is real. And so the two other things I want to unpack. One is electrification. We're big advocates for electrification. This is an opportunity to really pull gas, out of these communities. Gas has other potential risks, earthquake areas, right? All of our code is pushing towards going all electric anyway in the years to come. But oftentimes on going all electric, we say, hey, it should be cost neutral. And if you're building a home the right way, you're going to have lower utility bills long term because you've got a well insulated home, doing all these things, and you're going to have a higher performing, higher efficient, much more efficient system. But I'm hearing from people rebuilding, those costs coming in all electric are 25 grand more, 30 grand more. It's because we have contractors who really don't understand how to do it the right way to do it at lower costs. They don't understand you don't have to run piping now for the gas lines at all if you do it the right way. So that's something that we really need to address and we're trying to tackle. And I think this is where group purchasing can help out. But we need to lower those costs of electrification. The other thing I want to address is landscape. We talk a lot about the homes. We don't talk enough about the landscape, which is at least half the issue, if not more. I think it's a credible opportunity for us to re-envision what landscape could be. We've had a ton of discussion here lately, and you mentioned this earlier about brush clearance around these zones. So around the homes, you have zone 0, which is that first 5 feet. You have zone 1, which is that next 5 to 25 feet. And we're talking right now with IBHS, which is the Insurance Business Health and Safety Institute. We're talking about with CAL FIRE and others. They want to have no vegetation within that first 5 feet. And look, you're in a rural area, you may have the space to do that. When you're in these urban environments, we already are dealing with heat issues. We're dealing with lack of biodiversity. We're dealing with a lack of groundwater penetration that we need to refill our water table. We can't be having no vegetation in that first 5 feet. We might have no vegetation in entire areas of the city.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking with them to say, hey, can we have ground cover in these areas? Can we do these things to make sure we're keeping mature trees, which we know reduce risk of fire? And there's an opportunity for us here to stop talking about what we're taking away and talking about, well, actually, what if we design a landscape where it's got native oaks, which we know catch embers and drop them to the ground and reduce risk of fire, and we're planting them in tree corridors, and we're bringing back biodiversity because we're using native grasses. We're using things like native shrubs that, I have this vision in my mind where we design our homes the right way, design our landscape the right way. Fire comes, sure, we evacuate. Maybe our landscape burns. Our homes are fine. A landscape regrows in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And we're okay. And that's the future. And we could do that now. That is not a stretch. We just aren't implementing the tools that we have. I do want to make sure, too, we talk a little bit about insurance if we can, because you mentioned insurance costs and lack of insurance money. We're in this place right now where people are starting to realize how much things are going to cost.
Yeah.
And that's before we get into supply chain issues, before we get into labor issues, because we've got ice showing up at construction sites, and it's really hard to get construction workers now. This is not a joke. This is a very serious issue in the construction and real estate industry. And, insurance companies have just not been present in these conversations in the way that I think they really need to be. The insurance companies here in California have essentially been keeping their profit margins roughly the same and dropping the areas they cover. And them dropping those areas they cover and reducing those size and putting that risk onto the state. In California, we have something called the FAIR Plan. The state will have state insurance that kind of picks up those areas that can't get insurance. They're shifting their risk to the state, which means all of us will pay for it eventually. And they're signaling. People talk about, are they valuing climate risk? They are already saying, we have valued climate risk, and we've said it's not insurable. That's why they're reducing the areas they're covering, right? So we need to be having a conversation with them about how do we get the insurance companies involved in helping us fund these changes to homes, create the education. It astounds me that they're not trying to reduce their risk cost and a cost exposure through education and through rebuilding.
Yeah.
Right now, on a home level, you for the most part cannot get property level insurance. You can get community level insurance, but not property level insurance. So you could rebuild your home in these communities that have been impacted to the highest areas of code, follow all the rules, and you may not be insurable because they're not looking at your home, they're looking at the community. And we need to shift this. This is a big deal. We need to shift that market in the right direction if we're going to be able to move forward as a society, right?
Yeah. It's such a challenging moment, and so many folks were either even just ignoring the aspect of communities not able to get insurance now or losing access to insurance. Like I've met folks who are incredibly concerned because there might be only one company in the area that still insures their home, and that could change in the future. And then, what do you do? Or the rates are going up so high that folks who could afford the property they lived in at one point no longer can. And to your point, they're making those choices not based on how they're managing their own property and how they consider the risks that are in front of them. It's a blanket approach, and it's just not sustainable. I don't have the answer to it. I wish I did. That's the million.
I think it's above our pay grades.
Yeah, we can yell into the void as much as we want, but unfortunately can't influence that. But
advocacy is important here. I think we need to all become advocates in a bigger way of raising awareness around the challenges with insurance and calling them out, to be present. One of the examples I love to share, and sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox on this issue. We tried for 3 years to get funding to launch the certificate training for contractors and landscapers on home hardening and landscape hardening. We applied for a grant from State Farm, small grant, 10 grand. They gave us a grant from the State Farm Foundation for us helping to develop this training, which was great. I couldn't get a single person from State Farm to show up at any of the workshops we did, promote the training. They didn't want to be involved. And that blew me away. The signal was they didn't want to be connected to that risk. They didn't want to be connected to that work. I mean, you guys are funding this work. You won't even show up. And so we need to change that dialogue. I do want to give a shout out for Mercury Insurance, Paradise Fire. A lot of people heard about in Northern California. A lot of people, again, rebuilt their homes to all the highest levels of code and couldn't get insurance. Mercury Insurance actually sent folks out in person who assessed those homes. And Mercury Insurance now insures 80% of Paradise.
Wow.
Because they were the only company that was willing to send people out and assess properties. And they're like, oh, you've done 95% of the things you needed to do for this property. Yeah, we'll insure you.
Especially if they're up to the level of code that you were speaking earlier about.
Right.
Where okay, we've done our due diligence like help us help you. Like
Right.
this is a relationship. It's not a one-sided conversation.
Right.
I appreciate your advocacy here, and it's a challenge, of course, that you and I don't have the privilege of solving during this conversation, but we have to keep talking about it. And I think helping folks understand what they can do as an individual and how to prepare and navigate what comes next. And I'm sure a lot of the resources that you've mentioned previous would touch on that as well. This is a lot to take in. Let's be real. This is a very heavy conversation. And I'm sure many of the folks that you speak to feel overwhelmed by all these challenges that are in front of them. What advice would you offer to them who are either trying to become more climate resilient themselves or find themselves in the unfortunate position of having to rebuild after something like the Palisades fire?
Yeah, I appreciate those questions. And look, I don't have all the answers. It's a hard thing to watch. Like I said, a couple of my team members lost their homes. One of them has moved 5 times already. She has a young daughter. The other one who's lost her, she's moved 3 times, and she has a couple kids. Like this, seeing people go through that is really tough. And so I think making sure that we're recognizing the length of time things are going to take, and for them to settle in and know that. And look, I'm not going through that, right? But it's a hard thing to say. I want to say there's a lot of hope, though. I spoke at a workshop about 2 months ago for senior citizens. 600 senior citizens who had lost their homes in Altadena, over 90% people of color, and they were there and committed to the process because for them it wasn't about them; it was generational wealth. They had those homes, and that was generational wealth for their kids, their grandkids. And they were committed to rebuilding the right way. They showed up at our workshop for 2 hours to learn how to rebuild more resiliently because they want to make sure it was there for their kids. And that gave me so much hope and inspiration because these are people that didn't need to go through it, right? They could sell and walk away and they wanted to do that. So I think we need to hold on to that hope and realize that there's a lot of other people going through the process and just try to get as much education as you can and not try to rush things. I think, look, again, I haven't experienced this loss, but I think there's always this knee-jerk reaction when you lose something that you want to get back to sort of what I call valence or balance as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
We just need everything back the way it was, but
Which is understandable.
totally understandable. But the reality is things will not be the way they were. And I think accepting that and settling in with that for a little bit and okay, well, how do we do this better? How do we go about this in the right way? And I don't like saying that this disaster is an opportunity, but I think through this disaster, we can build at scale a more sustainable, resilient community at a larger scale than it's ever happened before.
Yeah.
Fully electrified, fully resilient homes. And I'm actually more worried right now about the communities that didn't burn, who are not doing the things to harden their homes, who are not talking to their neighbors about their tree that they've got all these dead leaves that's been accumulating. One of the things that was an inspiring story for me in Australia, there's a province there, and I'm going to probably butcher the name of it, so I don't want to say it, but they're the most fire-prone province in Australia. They have about 17,000 firefighters, professional firefighters. They have 100,000 volunteer firefighters who've been trained, and they station resources, hoses, generators, the things they need, and always in the community, different places. Those volunteer firefighters know how to unlock that building, get the equipment, know how to use it.
That's staggering.
That's the model we need here, because you hear all these stories after the fire. People stayed behind and they didn't know what they're doing. What if we actually trained those people and they knew that there was a place a block away they could go to get equipment? It would change the conversation about what we're doing here. And I think that's part of the cultural shift we need to make.
I'm inclined to agree. I mean, just the education across the board, whether it's being informed on the wildfire risks, as I mentioned before, and how you get that information so you can make choices. And when you choose to leave, or if you need to leave, even small things like Watch Duty or Nixle and all these other apps in the United States that you can use. But beyond that, I think it goes much further. Like the choices you make for your home, the choices you have to make to rebuild your home. There's so many layers that we've talked about today. And I think every one of them in some way comes back to an education narrative and a mindset shift. It's so unfortunate that tragedies like this happen, but I am grateful for folks like yourself who step in and look around and find, okay, how do we learn from this? How can we build back better? And how can we intentionally help the communities who haven't burned but need to learn from this moment to make sure if tragedy strikes in their own community, they're prepared to manage it and they're in a position where they can rebuild if they have to as well. Because this is accelerating. This is not something that's just, all right, well, the fires are done now. Like, I wish, because it's a conversation I'm expecting to have for the rest of my life in Southern Oregon. And that's a scary proposition to think about. But I do think that our communities have the opportunity to be intentional, to help them be more resilient and deliberate as we rebuild and plan for the future. I'm grateful for all of the perspective you've shared here today. I've got one final question for you today, Ben, unrelated to climate change and wildfires entirely. What is one tool you use on every project, no matter what you're working on?
So I'm going to go off script here a little bit. And I tell my kids I aspire to be a warrior poet. And so I guess in life, hopefully I'm a warrior a bit against climate change.
I like it.
But I'm going to answer your question with a poem.
Okay.
If I could. And hopefully I'll explain a little bit what it means. So
we got a digital builder first here, which makes me happy.
Humor me on this. I figure if this whole thing doesn't work out around executive directoring, I can just go.
Yeah, you got a second career already.
So we struggle to control what we don't know. Engineers to calm our fears. Crumpled stamped plans to dry our tears. Money spent, concrete rent, and steel bent. Scholars with grants, drought-tolerant plants. Papered up resilience. But what if we had it all wrong? What if the answer was in here all along? A smile like a seismic retrofit, an outstretched hand better backup than any battery. A microgrid of kindness, removing our industrial digital blindness. Somehow the climate changed, yet we remained the same. Gasping for water, air, and light. Breathing the calm of leaf and shade. The connection of earth on spade. A network of wires mixed with roots. Frayed, crossed, and lost. The unraveling shoots of change, charged with so many feelings. Leaving us reeling from fire, smoke, or heat. The only constant, the human heartbeat.
I'm going to have to clap for you here because first, like I said, digital builder first, as far as having a poem read on air. But I think you've got a shot at that second career. That's very moving.
Thank you.
I've got a little bit of hair standing on the back of my neck right now, just as far as the scope of what you touched in just a few short phrases. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Did I answer your question on the tool? The tool was us. It's the people.
It is.
And, I think it's very much like our way as society to think like, oh, let's invest in all these things. And yes, we need that. Like, hey, we run an accelerator program for startups and we work to help those scale. Like, we're doing all this work on electrification and doing all this work on materials and embodied carbon. And there's like 1,000 things I could have gotten into. But at the end of the day, it's all about the people.
And you've touched on the core of what I consider Digital Builder to be about, to be honest. And so we are obviously a technology podcast, and a construction and AECO industry-focused narrative is prevalent no matter what episode we are doing. But for me, the focus on the people is the core part of it because it's the consistent thread based on whatever we're talking about. And admittedly, from my seat, I think it's the most important one. So I love your answer. I think that's great. And I appreciate the unique way that you chose to bubble it up for us today. And for everybody out there listening to us, if you haven't figured this out by now, I am Eric Thomas, the host of Digital Builder. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you want to reach out and ask me any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Eric Thomas that works at Autodesk. And until the next time, goodbye.